Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with another deck profile. It's a big day today because Revengers are back on the menu, baby. That's right, we got Raging Form back in action for the premium format. So for those of you who don't know, or perhaps need a little refresher because you don't keep up with premium news lately, we got the announcements for the 3 new premium sets of this year. That would be the Musketeer set, the Jewel Knight set, and the Revenger set. These are pretty awesome, and they revitalize some key limit break units for those respective subclans. And Revengers, and Raging Form Dragon more specifically, was one of the chosen few. And how could they not? Because my boy is shining. So I decided that I'd make a deck profile here as soon as possible, going over what changed for the deck as well as how you would optimally build it for the premium format. There's a lot of ways to take Raging Form these days because between his couple of iterations from the V format and also because of other things like the Phantom Blast or Abyss Legion, you've also got access to Slay Hex. There's a lot of different cards to choose from. So I wanted to cut the confusion and give my thoughts on what would be the optimal deck strategy to run for this version of Revengers. As you may or may not tell, this is a bit of an unscripted video, so forgive me if I make some stumbles here or there, but I did do a fair bit of play testing for this deck in the short time that it came out because, oh my god, how could I not? I love Revengers to death. So I wanted to share with you guys what I've come up with after scientific research and experimentation. Alright, and without any further ado, let's begin. I hope you enjoy. So starting off with the Grade 3s, we've of course got to talk about Revenger Raging Form Dragon. So this is the original Limit Break version of the card, and I'm not going to explain in detail what it does, but I'll just give you the basic rundown. Essentially what it does is when you attack with it, at the end of that battle, you're able to retire 3 rearguards of Revenger and their card names to ride another Raging Form Dragon from the hand as stand, and it gets 10,000 power. This is a Limit Break 4 ability, by the way. So that is the basic synopsis of this deck. It's going to be a Vanguard multi-attack pressure kind of strategy, and with the new support, particularly from the Raging Raptor Rada and the Crest, we have a lot of burst potential with this deck. So this guy is going to be a key 4 of, because if we don't see him immediately for turn 3, we're gonna have a bad time. So I know I should be going to the rest of the Grade 3s here, but this would be a perfect time to segue into Raging Raptor and the Crest, because by understanding these 2 other cards, we'll be able to understand the whole synopsis for the deck build. So True Revenger Raging Rap Dragon has these 2 skills. First, and it's the new one, Act in the G Zone. If your Vanguard is a Grade 3 Revenger Raging Form Dragon with the Limit Break 4 ability, that's right, you can't use the V one, and you did not get an imaginary gift this fight, again, you can't use the V one. Cost, choose 1 or more cards from hand with the sum of their grades being Grade 3 or greater and discard them, aka Stride Fodder, and stride this card on your Vanguard circle from face down. Then, cost, turn a card with Revenger in its card name in your G-Zone face up. You get 2 Imaginary Gift Force, and you get a Revenger Raging Form Dragon Crest. Secondly, auto on the Vanguard Circle Limit Break 4. At the end of the battle of this unit attacked, if you have a hard card with Raging in its card name, you cost Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, and retire 2 rearguards, and discard 2 Grade 3 Abyss Dragon from hand. Put this unit into your G-Zone face up. Choose up to 1 face down True Revenger Raging Rap Dragon from your G-Zone. Stride it on Vanguard Circle as stand, and it gets drive -1 until end of turn. Now, the Crest here is going to do a lot for this as well. Now, the Crest is what you get off of the first effect, and it states, continuous, if your heart is a Revenger Raging Form Dragon with the Limit Break 4 ability, when you would pay the cost for the Limit Break 4 ability of the True Revenger Raging Rap Dragon on your Vanguard Circle. That cost may be paid with retire 3 rearguards with Revenger in their card names. That's amazing. Secondly, continuous. The original power of your Grade 3 cards with the Limit Break 4 ability becomes 13,000, including hard cards, aka your original Raging Form Dragon is just going to be the 13k base that we've come to expect from it. Third and finally, continuous. Your Vanguard's Limit Break 4 abilities are active even if your damage zone has 3 or less cards. Alright, so to boil it down for you, Raging Rap Dragon went from one of the worst stride options for Revengers into perhaps the best stride option for Revengers. With this single card, not only do you get the potential to have that history collection goodness of early strides and gift spam, but with the cost being adjusted to a mere retire 3 Revengers, you have the opportunity for multiple Vanguard swings as soon as you ride to grade 3. It doesn't matter what turn it is. The moment you ride to grade 3 with your regular Revenger Raging Form Dragon, it's go time, baby. Now, at first glance, you would look at this and say, okay, even if it's retired 3 rear guards, that is still a little bit hefty, but really, considering what it was beforehand, this cost is basically nothing. And there's actually a particular combo piece in this deck where, when it's retired, you'll be able to call another rear guard from the deck, meaning that since this isn't once per turn, you can get a potential 3 Vanguard swings as soon as you hit turn 3, even if the opponent is at grade 2. That is absolutely bonkers. The burst potential Raging Form just with these erratas here alone in the crest is absolute insanity. It is the peak performance of power creep in the premium format, and I don't know if this is going to end up being okay, but we'll ride the wave for as long as we can, whether or not it ends up being game breaking. So let me go ahead and talk to you through the rest of the deck list here. So back to the grade 3s. Now that we understand the importance of Raging Form Dragon and Raging Wrath Dragon, it's then time to tell you that we run 3 Revenger Slay Hex Dragon. So Slay Hex, a bit of an oldie. Essentially, it lets you ride Raging Form Dragon from the deck when you place it on top of a Revenger on the Vanguard circle. That means that no matter what, as long as you see Slay Hex or the regular Raging Form, you will be able to get the Raging Form. What's also nice about Slay Hex is that since he doesn't have the Imaginary Gift Force marker, riding him initially isn't going to cuck you out of the ability to use Raging Wrath's Act Effect, because it does specify that you need to have not gotten an Imaginary Gift this fight, so he will still keep you within that condition. It is a bit unfortunate that you have to Counterblast 1 and discard in order to use his Rewrite effect, but on the bright side, it does add it back to the hand, so you will be able to at least have that guaranteed stride fodder for Raging Form Dragon. This Counterblast is a bit, it's not the greatest, but since Wrapped doesn't actually require any Counterblast whatsoever anymore as long as you use the alternative costs, then it should be fine. You can still go for a Vanguard multi-attack even without any damage, which is another thing that makes this deck really great, because you can't damage deny it. It doesn't need 4 or more damage to limit breaks, and it doesn't need Counterblast whatsoever. So that's really good. Now, this next part is where I'm going to put my hat into the ring as far as point of contentions go, as many people have debated what other kind of grade 3s to run. Some have said run the V Raging Form, some have said to run the Phantom Blaster Legion. There's a lot of different options here. I decided to go for Revenger Raging Fall Dragon Reverse at 3 copies. So Revenger Raging Fall Dragon is a really, really good follow-up card. Not only is he a grade 3 Abyss Dragon, so it could be useful for Raging Wrath's cost, which, mind you, you can still pay the original cost, and that may be important, because if you don't have the ability to call an additional rear guard, which means aka you can't have another 3 rear guards for the extra multi-attack, you can still use the original cost, which only retires 2, albeit you will still have to discard 2 Abyss Dragons, Counterblast, Soul Blast, yada yada, right? Everything in the kitchen sink. But it is an option if you need to go for aggression, and this is a very aggressive deck, so do keep that in mind. Anyway, back to Raging Fall. So Raging Fall's skill effectively is another form of Vanguard multi-attack, but this one is a restand. And not only is it a restand, but it can power up your field in the process, as well as not cost any Counterblast. It's another one that doesn't necessarily cost any Counterblast. That's really, really strong. Now, you may look at this at first glance and say, yeah, but it's not a Raging Form Dragon, so the original Raging Form Dragon can't ride into it from the hand, because it's the V-Series one that says any grade 3 Revenger. And I agree. But I would add to that, I don't want to use that effect. There are much better options to multi-attack with. One of the cards in the G zone that we'll be running, and I'll be discussing more later on, is Chainranker Dragon. And with Chainranker Dragon skill, you get to copy the effect of your heart card. Now, copying a Raging Form Dragon is fine and dandy in order to try and get a multi-attack from the hand, but if you instead copy Raging Fall Dragon, you get a much superior multi-attack that has 2 instances of Twin Drive and the potential for the triple Battle Door effect. So there's a lot more power going on there, and it just continues your basic game plan of hefty Vanguard multi-attack pressure. So going on to the grade 2s, we got Wily Revenger Mana at 4 copies. This is just one of the best grade 2s of the deck, and I fully hope and expect that it gets reprinted for this set in the main deck. The main deck hasn't been revealed as of the time of recording this video, because again, I want to get you guys something to chew on almost right off the bat. But assuming they do reprint it, then this should be relatively accessible. But even not, then sorry, you're gonna have to pay some cash for it, because mana is fundamental. With her effect, you get to call a grade 1 or less Revenger to her column for absolutely free. It goes to the bottom at the end of the turn, but that doesn't really matter because you're going to be retiring it. One nifty thing about Raging Fall Dragon is, for those of you who don't know, Raging Fall Dragon does have the axe skill to lock a card to give 5k to the front row. What's interesting about this particular skill is that if you lock the card that mana calls, then when it unlocks at the end of the turn, it no longer has to go to the bottom of the deck because it's considered a new unit. That means that you can effectively keep this free +1 as long as you combo with Raging Fall Dragon. That is really nifty. So yeah, it's just easy ways of plussing, and that's a Revenger staple in of itself. Now, next up is another 4 of, which is Revenger Darkbless Angel. This is the coveted multi-attack card I was talking about. Its effect is that when you put it into the drop zone from rear for the cost of your unit's ability, as long as you've got a grade 3 or greater Revenger, you can counterblast one to call a grade 1, specifically a grade 1 Revenger from the deck. But you have to retire at the end of the turn. Again, not really that impactful, although Raging Fall can't save you from this one, most likely because the main way of locking is with the axe skill. You probably won't be using the auto version of the lock. So it will be old-fashioned retiring if you want to make use of that rear guard. This is so fundamental. I've already told you why, right? You need 3 rear guards to retire, and giving you a second instance of 3 rear guards gives you another Vanguard multi-attack and another reason to get your opponent dead as soon as possible. Enough said. Next up, is a little bit more of the techie stuff. So I run 2 versions of the grade 2 Revengers. One of them, sorry, that's another stutter. No script, right? I run 2 Dark Cloak Revenger Tartu. So Tartu's effect is when it's placed on the van or rear, you can Soul Blast to call it a grade 1 Revenger to any circle. It doesn't have to be on a occupied or free circle. It doesn't have to be to her column, nothing like that, just anywhere. So in that way, it's better than mana, but it costs a Soul Blast, so it's not as good. Plus, it also has to be placed from hand. Another stipulation to keep in mind. I'm rambling. So you call it, and at the end of the turn, you retire that unit. Again, it's just another way of getting an extra card on the board. Raging Fall can also save this unit from its inevitable demise. Good stuff. Lastly, I do have a 1-of copy, which is 1 of Overcoming Revenger Rukea. So this is both your ideal ride option, which is funny considering that it's as a 1-of, but also what I like about it is it has a continuous 5k as long as you have a grade 1 rear guard with Revenger in its name. This means that it's, funnily enough, the best grade 2 attacker that you've got, or just best attacker in general that you've got in this deck. Just being a 15k swinger at all times is really, really nifty. And because of how you do your retires, where you retire 3, that means you'll have a column remaining. This is the column you want to keep remaining, so that you can throw the first instances of your trigger checks all into Rukea for when he swings. Keep in mind, when you're doing rewrite shenanigans, the trigger effects that you put on your Vanguard aren't going to carry over to the new version of the Rapt or the Raging Form or anything like that. So you'll want to throw them on Rukea. This doesn't apply if you're doing Raging Fall shenanigans. You can just put on the Vanguard for maximum pressure there. That's another reason why I really like Raging Fall. But yeah, I just run a 1-of techie Rukea. You could easily take this out for a 3rd Dark Cloak Revenger Tartu, but I've noticed that in my play testing, not only is 4 mana and 2 Tartu enough for most of your scenarios, as you're not really going to be playing for many turns before I have to win or lose, but also the 1-of Rukea actually does come up more than you'd imagine, and that's in part because of the insane deck digging ability this deck possesses. On to the grade 1s. Dark Armor Revenger Rinnal is first up. So he is such a fantastic grade 1. He has the on-hit skill for when he hits as an attacker or a booster to look at the top 3 cards of the deck and add a Revenger to the hand, bot deck the others. That's just another free +1. It does have on-hit, but on-hit is also pressure. You can definitely call this guy to the front row rear circle and have him be an attacker if you want. If you have a force marker on him, you can do it like that. If you also happen to power him up with Raging Fall Dragon's axe skill, that's another way in which he can hit. Getting triggers on him is another way to get him to hit. You can really maximize this hit pressure and put your opponent a bit in a bind, because they really don't want to keep you giving you cards. That is just insane. Also, when it's retired from the rear circle by your card's ability, you can Soul Blast 1 to retire a card. It's just that added bit of Shadow Paladin spice for field control. It is pretty useful. If you're not Soul Blasting for the next card here that I'm about to talk about, or for Tartu very much, you could just blow a lot of your soul on Rinnals in order to keep wiping their cards. It burns the candle on both ends for the opponent because they need to keep guarding your attacks and also refilling their rear circles. You're not going to be able to call too many Rinnals, as you know, once they're dead, unless you shuffle them back with a particular G guard. But with that being the case, you still want to activate this at least a few times because it is worth it to take the 1-for-1 exchange there, especially since he's already getting exchanged for your retire skills. So if anything, it's more like a neg-1 on the opponent's part, and you just leave it at that. Now, the other 4 of grade 1 we have is Self-Control, Revenge, Rakia. This is your best grade 1 ride, no doubt about it. When you ride a grade 3 Revenger, you get to call any grade 1 Revenger from the deck as rest. Optimally here, there's a couple different choices. Considering its rest, you could call another Self-Control Revenger Rakia because it has its Soul Blast 2 cost in order to call a grade 2 Revenger from the drop zone. So if you, one of the niftiest combos you can do is that if you ride Rakia and Rukea, which totally aren't Legion mates, they look like it though, what you can then do is call a second Rakia from the deck, Soul Blast those 2 cards, and call back the Rukea. And now the Rukea is still going to be a 15k attacker even with the rest Rakia behind him, because he just needs the grade 1 to be in the same column, and that's it. So that's a really nifty thing. It's another way to +1. It's costly. You're probably only going to activate it once a game, if at all, and that's about it, especially since he'll end up dying and you need to replenish the field another copy of him. But he is still a nifty way to potentially +2, and that's more than good enough for a deck like this. Now, the final grade 1 unit we have is Revenger, Vigor, Maur. So Maur requires you to counterblast a particular Revenger. So keep that in mind, you can't counterblast the generic stuff. It has to be Revengers. So when you're counterblasting, be sure to prioritize the non-Revenger stuff when you can. But when you do pay this cost, you choose a card in your Vanguard circle with Revenger in its name, you search for a copy of that card from the deck to the hand. I don't really need to spell it out for you, but if you do want to do Raging Form stuff, adding another Raging Form to the hand is super helpful. But moreover than that, the real use for this, in my opinion, is that it gets you grade 3 Abyss Dragons. Grade 3 Abyss Dragons, aka cost fodder if you're trying to go for the triple wrap swing and you don't have Darkbless Angel. So that is so useful, but I say that about a lot of these cards. They're quote unquote so useful. But you know what? That's because this deck is fire. Everything here helps you with searching, it helps you with card advantage, it helps you with mitigating the game plan. It is a very, very tight-knit machine. I run them as a 3-of mainly because you do want to see like Revenger Raging Form Dragons as much as you can, just for discard fodder, and also if you want to do the rewrite, that's just how it is. But there's just another reason that I have to be honest with. There aren't that many good grade 1 Revengers. The only other decent grade 1 Revengers are either Transient Revenger Masquerade, which is a Mordred card, and you also have access to Claudus, but Claudus isn't really useful without Dorn because he's just a CB break even. That's not very good at all. So you don't want to go for either of the cards, meaning that you might as well just maximize on Maur and leave it at that. He does have a 6k base though, which kind of hurts, and he also only has 5k shield, so he is the weakest grade 1 of your deck, but it is still a gimmicky way to try and enable your break rides and enable your striding. Okay, one last grade 1, but it's not a unit. That'd be Elementary Sanctitude. I don't need to explain Elementaria. It's so goated in this format. You just get to say no to any guard restricted attack ever. It's great. Next up, we're going on to the triggers. So you have 3 Dark Shield Maclear. This is your draw PG. Enough said about that. We don't run 4 because Elementaria is a PG. There you go. Okay, so we have 4 Knight of Evil Spirit Gilling. This is just your Stride Fodder crit. In all honesty, you could opt to go for the Dagger Peaceful Passing guy. That's the one that goes in Soul and gives 10k in a drop, because your ability to pay cost for Stride is pretty damn good in this deck as it is. But I thought that at the end of the day, you probably wouldn't call that crit for the break even in 10k anyway. It just doesn't seem that useful, particularly because when you read the effect, the 10k is only until end of that battle, so you can't even really enhance your multi-attack shenanigans, and there are no stand triggers in this deck, so that also applies to the rear guards. So you really wouldn't go for that kind of a crit, therefore we're just going to fall back on Gilling. A critical trigger that actually is super useful in this deck is Taboo Mage Kafar. So the history collection errata for this guy means that it's revealed for a damage check. you draw a card. That's so useful for a deck like this. When you have a lot of crit pressure coming your way, but also the need to retire a lot of rear guards, your critical triggers also acting as draw triggers in the convenient scenario can really be a lifesaver. So yeah, we're going to run 4 of him. We also have 4 Astral Chain Dragon for a heal trigger. It's stride fodder. It helps you from getting smashed on the early turns in case you're going for against a hyper rush deck. It gives you 1 damage if you've been damage denied and you actually do want to push for CB. And of course, we also have to mention that it's an Abyss Dragon, so it can be pitched for True Revenger, Raging Wrath Dragon. That's a lot of different reasons to run this guy over most of the heal triggers. It's just a staple in this kind of a deck. And for the overtrigger, I went with Idospharo. Idospharo, the card from drop into hand, you don't really care about that very much. It's super useful, of course, but you're trying to kill, and it giving a critical means that is a 9th critical. And that's what you really care about, because you want your opponent dead as soon as possible, and this will help get you there. Now for the G-Zone, we'll start off with some of the basics. Of course, we're going to be running 4 of the True Revenger Raging Wrath Dragon, but on top of him, we're going to be running 1 Drag Ruler Revenant. So an interesting thing about Raging Wrath Dragon, Raging Wrath's act ability requires you to turn a card with Revenger in its card name in the G-Zone face up. So True Revenger Drag Ruler Revenant counts as this cost. The reason why we do this is because this deck seeks to maximize the Raging Wrath Dragon. So no matter the scenario you find yourself in, you want to be able to use this guy. So of course, there's the obvious scenarios where you'll be able to go for a triple Raging Wrath Dragon turn, and there's also the scenarios in which you'll only be able to go for 1 Raging Wrath Dragon turn. But if you only go for the 1 Raging Wrath Dragon turn, that means you have 2 left to face up in the G-Zone because you flipped up the Drag Ruler Revenant instead of killing one of your 4 Raging Wraths. Another scenario that could happen is if you're truly a mad lad and you just have the God opening with a lot of CB to burn as well as like Dark Angels, what you can do is after you flip up the Drag Ruler Revenant, you can go for a 4 Raging Wrath Dragon turn, as absurd as that sounds. So you can push it that way. This ratio is also useful if you happen to have no CB whatsoever and also not any access to, you could also do this if you don't have access to Darkbless, but particularly just no CB, right, is what I'm meaning to say here. You can just use the Axgo Raging Wrath Dragon, flip up the Drag Ruler Revenant, and then don't multi-tech. You just take 2 force markers and the early stride and you chill with it. And then on the next turn, you'll have 3 Raging Wrath Dragon left in order to go for the triple Vanguard swing. You can do it that way too. This is just a really, really ideal ratio to give you the maximum flexibility for using your Raging Wrath Dragons. I know some people would be like, but that's a lot of space in the G-Zone. But literally everything in this G-Zone is meant to kill your opponent. That is what it's here for. It's here to win in the most devastatingly epic way possible. And also at the end of the day, even if you do have, say, a leftover Raging Wrath Dragon, you can just use as a flip fodder for the next stride unit we're going to talk about, which is Chainraker Dragon. So Chainraker Dragon can flip your Raging Wrath Dragon and then get all the original abilities of your heart card. Raging Fall Dragon. Yeah, a really good card. And because of the triple Battle Door skill, your opponent's going to have to really start eating some cards if they want to stop your pokey rear guards. Now, bear in mind, and this is going to be the part where I bring up the strategy, when talking about your force markers, I suggest running Force 1 because you get multiple force markers in this deck. And not only do I suggest Force 1, I suggest you stack all of your Force 1s on your Vanguard circle. Maximize how devastating your Vanguard attacks are. Really make them nigh unguardable, or if they are guardable, make them as annoying and hit as hard as possible, because that is the entire winning image of this deck. Without Raging Form going at them multiple times and trying to kill them dead, you have no image for this entire deck strategy. So that's what you should be doing here in more cases than not. Of course, you can opt to try and put your force markers on the rear guard circle and power them up. It's kind of neat. If you're trying to power for nulls and stuff like that, it's kind of cute. But without any rear guard multi-attack, nor do you really have any stand triggers to help enable rear guard multi-attack, it's really not that useful. All of your multi-attack comes with the Vanguard circle, so if you want to truly maximize your force markers, you do it that way, in my opinion. Plus, also Chain Ranker, you can just copy the regular Raging form to right into the Raging form of the hand. But as I talked about before, that form of multi-attack is not very useful compared to doing the Raging Fall, especially since you're not getting a force marker from it anymore, since it's not the V Raging form. So bear that in mind. The next stride we have is 2 Drag Principal Morfessa. Drag Principal Morfessa, it's the totally fun, fair card that everyone loved when it came out and everyone thinks is the epitome of good card design. Yeah, but in all seriousness, this is a very dumb card, and it's a dumb card in every Shadows G zone, and this is no exception. Its Ritual 10 will just give you the very easy crit, power, battle door, all the good stuff. Note that you do not have any rearguard multi-attack, so Morfessa is not too powerful here, but as a seemingly free and easy way to get a lot of crit pressure on your opponent, it's super useful. On top of that, since you don't have inherent crit pressure from your rear guards nor from the force marker that you're choosing, because again, you should be choosing force 1, this giving a crit to your entire front row is a great way to stall an opponent who happens to be at 4 damage. So yeah, just a good card, run 2 of it. At the end of the day, you could just always flip another copy of itself. That's why I run 2 of it. Finally, for our offensive strides, we've got Dark Knight Crow Quash. So Crow is another Vanguard multi-attack. Go figures, the whole point of this deck. This one requires your opponent to have 2 or less rear guards. And because of that, it's not always situationally correct. But when they do have 2 or less rear guards, not only do they lose whatever rear guards they did have, but for the price of 4 rear guards, you get to stand this guy for an extra triple drive for free in hand economy. So that's a +3 on the hand. And you also get 10,000 power for both swings. Just a really nice, easy double swinger that really, as long as your opponent plays into it, you should be good to go. Now on to the not offensive crap. Our final stride unit is Harmonix Messiah. You don't ever stride this. Hell, even against the Link Joker matchup, you probably don't stride this because Raging Fall Dragon absolutely murks that matchup. He just gets to freaking go for free because they're locking your cards already. So it's super easy to play into the Link Joker matchup with that. But if for whatever reason that you're struggling with it and you want to get those cards unlocked and you don't have the Raging Fall, then you can use this guy to unlock your cards if you want. But what he's used here for more than anything is just to reveal it and put a Guardian Shield ticket into the hand. So after you do that, and you know you're not playing against Link Joker, you can just flip it up for your Chain Rankers or Morfessas or stuff like that. Just more flip fodder to go around. It's pretty easy stuff. Now on to the G-Guards. Your G-Guard selection is not very vast here. We're playing 3 Deep Griever Dragon, who is really the important one here. With Deep Griever, you can bot deck a lot of grade 1 cards and get really hefty shield, potentially even the PG effect if you put back 5, which is not too hard in this deck, although the Counter Blast is something you want to be able to manage properly. But by putting 5 back, you can prevent deck out, because deck out is so freaking real in this deck. You drive check a bajillion times, you call from the deck a octillion times. It's so easy to run out of deck. And once you do, well, guess what? You're gonna have to face your own consequences and deck out by your own hand if you don't have Deep Griever. So please do Deep Griever. It's just the best G-Guard that we've got in this deck. Okay, and then finally, we got 1 copy of Dark Dragon, Dark Veil Dragon. Just for a Soul Blast, you can get really beefy shield. So if you know there's a really big attack incoming and you're gonna need your G-Guard in order to counter it, then you can opt for the Dark Veil Dragon before attempting to Deep Griever everything back, because these two technically go against each other, so time that right. And that's all I have to say about that one. Okay, and so that was all the cards in the G-Zone. Pretty solid stuff. Basically, everything is there to kill the opponent, and the leftovers are just flip fodder, so that's how you should consider it. The entire point of the deck as a Shadow Paladin deck like this is to fodderize whatever isn't necessary. It's cruel, it's unusual, but it's also extremely fun. Oh, and our starter, Crisis Revenger Fritz, just pick whatever one you want. This is a Revenger though, so it's kind of the best choice by default, but that's all I have to say about that. Of course, your deck staples, just Quick Shield, Guardian Shield, the Raging Rap Dragon Crest, the Imaginary Gift Forces, all the usual stuff. And that's going to be it for the deck profile. Let me know what you guys think about this particular deck profile. Again, I'm putting my hat in the ring with the Raging Fall kind of stuff. I just want to part you guys this idea that it's the Vanguard that's going to be doing the killing and the winning. So maximize your Vanguard swings however you want. I know that the V-Series Raging Form Dragon is another pretty good option, and the way that it combos with the regular Raging Form Dragon is super neat, because then it counts as the raging form, and then in of itself can then leapfrog into something that isn't necessarily yet another raging form dragon. But in attempting to do so, I think you stray away from the true potential of this deck, which is how it can manipulate Chain Ranker for optimal battle lines, and that's why I went this way with it. But still, there's so many ways to build it. So let me know how you guys built this deck and what you would suggest for changes on this deck list. I'm always looking to improve it, and although it is basically my main deck and it is my avatar, I'm not saying that I'm like the god king of raging form and I know everything. So I'm always looking to hear from the other Shadows players on how they took his direction. And with that said, if you did like this deck profile, do let me know what other deck profiles I can do, what you want to see. I'm trying to get back into these a little bit more, especially since I'm not printing proxies anymore and just decided to do it a bit more online style. I'm not sure if folks like that better or not, but it certainly works out better for me as of now. So we're going to try and do that for a little while more. Take care and God bless.